editor of The Girlfriend. I'm also the editor of the Girlfriend Book Club, which now has 46,000 members. So thank you guys for being members of the book club. It's always a pleasure to interact with you every day. So thank you. Today, we are so pleased. We're discussing our August book club pick, Lessons in Chemistry. And we've got Bonnie Garmus, the author, with us to talk about it. And as I always say during these monthly discussions, I'm always pleasantly surprised by the books that you all vote on and choose. So you 46,000 people have never let me down. When I read this book, couple weeks ago, I just absolutely couldn't put it down. It's one of my favorite books of the last few years. So thank you for choosing Lessons in Chemistry. And now let's welcome Bonnie Garmus.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Welcome. And I meant what I said. I just, it's a very long democratic process, how we choose the month's book club pick. And so it goes out, people vote over the course of days. So when you win, you really are a big winner.
That's good to hear. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So first of all, how did you come up with the idea for Elizabeth Zott? Was she in your head for a long time? And because I know this is your debut novel, your first novel.
Yeah.
I also know you're in your 60s, and I'm not going to say more than that. So was this like swirling around in your brain for a long time to write something about a chemist in the future? Or where did you come up with her?
Well, she had been a minor character in a novel that I'd started, probably, maybe a decade or more, even more before. But she'd been a very minor character in that book. And I never finished that book. And then I'd written another book that never went anywhere. And then one day at work, I was having a really, really bad day at work. And I was just irritated. It'd been yet another meeting that had a lot of sexism in it. And I went back to my desk, and instead of working, I wrote the first chapter of Lessons in Chemistry that day.
Wow. Okay. And I think I read somewhere, did it take you a few years to write this book?
It took me over 5 years. Yeah. I was working, and I think, for me, I'm not a super fast writer. I write a lot, but I delete a lot. I edit a lot. I'm a copywriter by trade. So rewriting is in my blood, and that is what I do.
Right. So that first chapter you wrote 5 years ago, did it remain the first chapter, or did it change quite a bit?
Oddly, that chapter, I wrote two things that day. I wrote that chapter, and I wrote the last 2 lines of the book.
Really?
I just needed I needed to have a target to shoot for. Right. And I just thought, these won't, probably hold, and I'll probably get rid of them. And I never did.
So for the handful of people who haven't read this book, why don't you tell them a little bit, without giving too much away, what the book is all about?
Okay. Well, the book is about a woman named Elizabeth Zott. It's fiction, but she's a chemist in the late 50s, early 1960s, who works at a research institute, but then is fired for the crime of being unwed and pregnant. And when she goes on to a different job, it's a job that she does not want, which is to be the star, or really just the host of a TV cooking show where she's supposed to be teaching housewives how to make dinner. But Elizabeth Zott is a chemist at heart. So instead, she teaches the housewives across America about chemistry, because cooking is really chemistry. And in doing so, she ends up empowering this nation of women, and frankly, a lot of the men as well, to realize how much we all have in common and how much we need each other, but also how capable we are and what we're really made of at a molecular level.
Yeah, it was an incredible read. And it's, become such a massive bestseller. I mean, when this went off to the presses and then it came out, did you ever imagine that you would achieve this kind of success with your first novel?
Oh my God, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What does your family say? I'm always curious, like what you think and what your family and friends think about this.
Oh, my family is just great. They're like, oh, we all live in a state of shock all the time. I think, I would tell very few people I was working on a book. I think a lot of writers are like that. They just sort of, you're doing it on the side. It probably won't go anywhere. But I do remember telling one friend I was working on this book about this woman who was a chemist, and then she became a TV cooking show host, and then she changes a nation, and she was just like, oh God, that is going nowhere. And I thought, I thought, yeah, she's probably right because A, I'm not a chemist. B, I do not like to cook. And C, I'm not a single mom. And so what am I doing? Well, I'm doing what copywriters do.
Yeah.
I'm writing from, you never write about anything in copywriting. And
Right.
so, yeah, I got to live the whole thing in my imagination. And that's a wonderful place for me to be.
So I'm guessing over 5 years, did you put it down quite a few times and pick it up again, or?
Yeah, I mean, I did, I was working, so I didn't have a lot of time. And working as a writer means you don't really want to come home and write anymore.
Right.
So what I started doing to make progress, I would get up really early in the morning and write before work. And then I got to work and I was tired of writing, and then there I am. Yeah, I just decided, for me, I think, it's really interesting. I read this report lately about how certain books take 5 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's me. Oh, look, it's here in a study. So I guess I'm not as slow as I thought. But yeah, no, it takes a long time. And then the publishing process is very laborious. It's very long. And I mean, it's not laborious, but it takes, well,
Yeah.
after I signed with the publishers, they said it'll be out in 18 months. And I thought, what? How is that possible?
18 months.
Yeah, yeah. And it's because there's so much pre-publicity and they have to get all these people to read it, and you have to go through copy edit and editing and everything. It's a long process. I think people really don't realize how long it takes to get a book out there.
Right, right. So I have to talk about the dog 630 in this book a little bit. I mean, I have a dog that I love more than anything practically, except my 3 kids and husband. But I mean, where did you come up with the idea for this dog, making him such a character in the book, and the whole word count? And I mean, we're not giving too much away. I mean, the dog is really a big part of the book, and I love that.
Oh, thank you. Well, he is a very important part of the book. And when I was first writing him, I really didn't know that he would ever have a point of view. But he started commenting on scenes. And at first I thought, okay, people aren't going to like this. It's kind of magical realism. But then he just seemed to know so much more than the other characters. And he added, I was really trying to round all of my characters, and I needed someone to comment on people, but from another side of the animal kingdom, because we do a lot of weird things, and we have a habit of thinking that we're more intelligent than animals. And I kind of wanted to flip that on its head and bring you a dog that knows what's going on and has some ideas about what you're doing wrong and can't believe how many mistakes you make, how many lies you tell during the day. But honestly, that dog and the words, that was based on a dog I had, Friday, who was super intelligent. She'd been badly abused. We got her a shelter, and she turned out to be a combination of Gandhi and Einstein, to the point where we didn't teach her words. She taught herself words. She'd watch us talk. She'd memorize words. And it was really something to live with a dog like that. It was that hyper intelligent.
Right.
When we were transferred to Switzerland, Friday picked up German.
Wow, really?
Oh yeah, yeah. The dog was smarter than anybody in the family.
I have to say, I started looking at my own dog with a whole new eyes after reading this book, I have to say. So, I'm just wondering what the reaction has been, what it's been like going on press tours and book signings, and women coming up to you. What do your fans say to you when they come up to you?
Well, I think for a lot of women, they feel, especially of that generation, they feel more seen. I think a lot of women back then just had to put up with a lot, and their contributions were completely ignored if they were able to contribute at all. But I also think that lately, in the United States, women's rights has become once again a huge issue, and this is a fight that we have all been fighting for a very, very long period of time. And so what readers say to me is, this was set at a different time period, but it's still so relevant today. And that was something I was trying to, when I was writing it, I put it in that time period to convince myself that we had moved forward, because I wasn't very sure anymore based on the lack of respect for women in the workplace. I was just sort of at my wit's end by that point. So I did it. I did it then. I also put it in that time period because that's when my mom was a mom. And it gave me a chance to see what she had had to give up and give her a lot of respect, and to those women as well. But that's what mostly people come up and they say, my God, this is so relevant.
Yeah. I hope you were able to convince yourself that
Yeah,
things
I
have
did. Yes,
good.
I had to do a lot of research into that era, and I really didn't realize that women couldn't write checks or anything
Right.
on their own. Your husband had to co-sign everything you did. So it was really a wake-up call. On the other hand, we do seem to be going backwards in time a little bit right now. So
Yep.
hopefully we can
Yeah.
change that.
So, talking about your success, I know this is being made into a series with Brie Larson. Is that right?
Yeah.
Brie,
Yes.
yeah, playing the main character, and she's producing it, I believe. So,
Yes.
what's that process been like? I mean, taking this from the page and getting it up on the screen. What's that been like?
Well, I'm not doing the writing. They have a showrunner, a writer who's really good, and he just showed me the first two scripts, and I really like, especially the pilot. I really liked it. Hollywood has to do their own thing. The book
Right.
is one thing, but making it into a limited series, which is what it's going to be on Apple, is something entirely different. You have to reorder things in order for every episode to end in a certain way that
Right.
convinces you to keep watching.
Yeah.
So originally I was so naive, and I said to my agents, oh, I think I'd like to work on the writing, on the adaptation, in tandem with the other writers. And they just looked at me and they said, yeah, you don't really know what's coming your way. It's called pre and post publication. You will
Yeah.
not have any time. So
Right.
they were completely right. And, I'm really glad that I just let go, because the book is so personal to me. I mean, it's something that I worked on for so long. I
Right.
know it so intimately, and you just have to let them go and let them go and do their thing. And that's what I'm doing. And I have the greatest people on this team. So it's really been something. And they're shooting right now, right this instant in LA.
Wow.
Yep.
When will this come out? Next year,
Probably,
2023?
yeah, 2023, probably late summer, early fall.
Well, this is exciting. I wondered go look back at the book. What was the most difficult part to write about, or the most difficult character to kind of get your grips on? I mean, was there a difficult part of this book at all? I mean, I know the whole thing was
Yeah.
difficult, but was there?
Yeah, yeah, the whole thing. People always say, "Do you love to write?" And I always want to say, "Yes," but truthfully, it's like, "Oh my God, it's horrible." Um, I think some of the sad scenes were very hard for me to write, and yeah, those were quite difficult for me emotionally. Honestly, I think when you're invested in a book, if it makes you cry, then it'll probably make other people cry. Um,
Right.
and those yeah that was quite that was quite hard for me. It is kind of funny though, that because it is all made up, and so you wonder why you're investing all this emotion in these things. But there were plenty of scenes I loved to write. I loved to write the Supper at Six show, and I just have so much fun doing that. So
That was great.
thank you.
Yeah, I had somebody posted in the book club the other day. I just finished lessons in chemistry and I'm sobbing. Did anybody else cry? And everybody's commenting, yes, of course we cried. Everybody cried.
Yeah, I cried. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for
So,
telling me.
so the pencil in the hair, did that come to you through when you were writing, or were you thinking about that when you were envisioning her right at the beginning?
She just seemed like the kind of person to me. Well, the pencil has, of course, as you know, a couple uses in the book.
Yeah,
But I really wanted to include a pencil, one, because a lot of scientists write in pencil, and they do so because they assume they're going to make mistakes. And a pencil always comes with an eraser. And thematically, it occurred to me that, a lot of bad things happen to people in the world every single day, and none of us go unscathed. And how do you live with disappointment or violence or whatever? How do you make that not rule your life? And it occurred to me, an eraser on the end of a pencil You can erase most of it. There's still a faint outline, but it does not define you. It does not rule you.
Right.
And so I really wanted that pencil to be a reminder of Elizabeth Zott's strength.
Right. And have you ever watched cooking shows?
Oh my God, I'm terrible. My husband actually showed me for the very first time Julia Child. I mean, that's how I am not a cook. I know it's terrible. I love people who cook. I admire people who cook. I try to hang out near their homes during dinner time in case they have a spare plate. But I am not a cook. I mean, I make dinner. I make dinner. As a friend of mine says, you and I are functional cooks. We're not great. But I love and admire people who do it. And I think they need to take another step up the ladder of adoration, because they are doing chemistry every day, and they're very, very talented chemists if they cook well.
And besides the main character's, storyline, I just remember, I mean, I just love the neighbor lived across the street, and her storyline and how she came to life. And I found myself just being fascinated by her, rooting for her. And, it was great to see how she developed throughout the book.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I liked writing her. She was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So were you writing throughout the pandemic, or no, it would have been before, right?
It was before, yeah. In fact, let's see, I submitted the book for Frankfurt just as we had just all entered lockdown, really.
Right.
And so, yeah, so Frankfurt that year was on Zoom. But yeah, no, I was working with my agent on some drafts, and then she said, "Come on, we really want to submit this now." And I said, "Okay." So that's when we did it. But yeah,
wow.
it was a long road.
Did you have a lot of rejections before getting an acceptance of this book, or?
Oh no, not on this book. This book was an interesting. It's very hard to get an agent. It's very hard to get a book accepted. And I know this better than anyone because I'd written a book before that got 98 rejections. I never got an agent. I never got anyone to read anything except for maybe 10,000 words. That particular agent who did take the time to read that other book was very gracious in one way and just awful in another. She wrote me an email and said, "You write really well, but this book is so overweight," because I gave her the page count. It was like 700 pages. And she said, "I'm not going to read it. You're a debut author. How dare you?" And so she said, "When you can write something of appropriate length, get back to me." Oh yeah, it was pretty scathing, but you know what? 6 months later, after I'd had my grieving period of rejection, I was in that meeting, and I sat down and I wrote this chapter, and then I was off to the races again. So yeah, it was really a shock that this has gone this way. But my agent signed me on a partial, believe it or not. I was very lucky because she had read the first 10,000 words of this book, and she said, "No, I'm just going to sign you." And I thought, yeah, I was so excited that day that I accidentally butt dialed the emergency fire department.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was terrible. So
well, I bet that agent is counting her lucky stars, right?
Oh my God, it was so embarrassing. I didn't know I had done it, and then they called me back when I didn't pick up, and they called me back and they said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "Oh, everything's great. I got an agent." Anyway, she said, "Could you please
don't do that again?"
Yeah. Okay.
No so everybody's going to want to know what authors inspire you. What have been some of your favorite books of the last couple of years?
Oh gosh, I have so many. I can start with the books that inspired me as a child. I was a huge reader, and I loved Louise Fitzhugh's Harriet the Spy, and I was a huge fan of Roald Dahl, Matilda, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But as I got older, I really got into all the Russian writers. I loved Flaubert, the French writers, and I was really, really greatly influenced by those people. And I was really influenced by John Irving and his writing style and his way of approaching tough topics like abortion in his book Cider House Rules. And then later on, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I mean, Amy Tam's, I love that book. Amy Tam is a huge influence. I mean, it's funny, I say these people are influences. they write really differently from me, but I'm such a fan of their work. I think Ishiguro's probably Remains of the Day is probably the most perfect book
Yeah.
ever written. I don't know, I have a million, and I always end up naming the same people. But one current author I love is Sigrid Nunez, who
Uh-huh.
wrote The Friend. So yeah, I have a lot. I really admire these people. I
Yeah.
latch onto their every word.
So what are you working on next? And are you still copy editing, or did you give that up
No, I gave up copywriting.
for copywriting?
I was lucky enough. Yeah, I was lucky enough to give it up because I'd just been working for such a long time, and yeah, I felt like, okay, now I can.
Right.
People are like, don't quit your day job. I see a lot of writers who do that. They think, oh, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to get an agent, and then that doesn't happen. Or you get an agent, and then your book never gets sold to a publisher, and you're kind of out of luck. I'm a little more practical than that, so I hung on to the bitter end.
Yeah.
But I am working on another novel, and I would tell you a little bit more about it, except that it keeps changing. And so I'm afraid if I say something, it won't have anything to do with the finished product.
Well, I hope it take 5 years before.
Hopefully not. I don't know.
How did you learn about chemistry for lessons in chemistry? Did you consult with chemists? I mean, how would you
I
know about such things?
Well, like I said, copywriting, you're always writing about things you don't know. And so that comes very naturally to me where you go, oh, okay, I have to learn this thing. Unfortunately, chemistry, I didn't realize how how difficult it is. But what I
Yeah.
did was I bought a book off of eBay, a 1950s textbook, because you cannot Google this stuff. You're
Right.
always going to get information that's more current. And I had to keep the science between 1952 and 1963. So I taught myself basic chemistry reading this textbook. And
Right.
also, I had the Children's Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments, which is banned
Oh,
because they had to let that go because so many kids were, burning themselves up. Include
oh
I, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So what's your writing process like now that you're not working full time? I mean, do you have set hours? You try to do it every day? Do you give yourself a break
Yeah.
of a few weeks every once in a while? I mean, what's your process like?
Well, honestly, right now I'm doing still so much post publication work, podcasts like these and things like this. I'm, I wish I was writing more, but right now, probably 3/4 of my day is still in post publication work. But what I do is what I've always done, really. I'm a rower. Rowers get up early. If I'm not rowing, I'm just up, and that's when I write. So I might be writing from 4:30 or 5 in the morning until 8:30 in the morning, and then I'm really tired. And then I take my dog for a walk, and then I come back at it.
Yeah.
But by 8:30, everybody else is up, and so then the other work starts coming in.
Right.
So yeah, it's a long
Well,
day.
I was going to ask you what you love to do besides reading and writing, and I know now that you said rowing, and that's in the book as well. So,
Yeah,
so obviously you have a passion for rowing.
yeah.
So, are there other things that you love to do as well, and in your free time, if you ever have any free time?
Yeah, I love to go hiking with my husband, and I'm not actually on a rowing team right now. I'm not rowing at all. I was going to join that team in Chiswick, but with COVID that shut down, and now that the book is out, I've just lost hours in the day. But I am a open water swimmer, so that's something I really really enjoy doing. Although I haven't done nearly enough of that lately either.
Yeah.
So yeah, right now I'm just kind of walking around London with my dog, and that's my break.
It's so interesting that we're almost out of time, but I just interviewed Delia Owens recently, who wrote Where the Crawdads Sing, of course, and that was
Yeah,
her debut novel, and she's in
yeah,
her 70s, and she's just like overwhelmed by the outpouring of how popular her book is, and then the movie just came out, and there seems to be something. I mean, some advice here maybe you could give to other older women, like never give up, basically. Like, if you've got a book in your head, get it down there because people are publishing debut novels at all ages.
yes. And one thing is, it's always surprising to me because people will say, "Oh my gosh, you're in your 60s," and I'm always like, "Well, when I pick up a book, I don't automatically go, 'How old is this author?' It
Right.
never has occurred to me." And so the great thing, I want to say this to everybody listening, being this age is that you have far more experiences to write about. I mean, far more. And you have a lot more, I don't know, I want to say, I want to say maturity. I'm not very mature actually, but you just have a much broader view of life. You also know what you like and you don't like, and you're at that point where you're not trying to impress anyone anymore. Wow, those are a lot of things in your favor, I've got to
Yeah.
say.
That's a really good, because we're all about celebrating life at every age and
Yeah,
celebrating female friendship and
yeah,
accomplishments later in life. So that's perfect. so,
yeah.
so
Good.
we will end on that note. Unless there's anything else you want anybody to know about the book, I would just encourage everybody to read it. Lessons in Chemistry. That hasn't. I mean, most of the book club members have already read it, but it's such a fabulous read. And I thank you so much for being here. Everybody who's watching this, stay on the page, because we're going to be posting about a half dozen conversation starters about lessons in chemistry so that you guys can talk about your opinions about the book as well. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Bonnie, for your interview and for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me over. I loved it. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
All
Good
right.
night.